What's up guys and welcome to a new video. So in this one I will just briefly go over the deck and do a deep dive on the tech cards and maybe talk a little bit about the matchups. So let's get right into it. First off we have the leader, Marshal D Teach. So what he says is that you can't activate any on-play abilities, for example Gekko Moria, Rebecca or Sabo. But on the other hand, you can trash one card from your hand and then make your opponent so they can't either use on play abilities for the rest of their next turn. So it's a double-edged sword, and I think the leader is really cool and really nice designed. Initially, I didn't like it at first because I don't like Floodgates effect, but in this case, you go minus a resource, so you have to use it properly, and if you don't, you get punished. So it promotes skillful gameplay because you have to know and navigate which and what turns you want to do the leader effect. So first off in the deck, I'm going to talk about the searchers. So we play 3 Hachinosu, 4 Lafitte, and we also play 4 This Is My Age. So Lafitte is like Bonnie or Momonosuke, so you can use it multiple times. You just have to pay 1 don and tap it, and then you can look at the top 5 cards of the deck, take a Blackbeard card, and put the rest on the bottom of the deck, which is really good in this deck, who is a grindy resource deck that want to strangle your opponent out of resources and then winning with the teaches in late game. So it's really nice to have a resource card that can be used multiple times. Also, your opponent will most likely attack it, and in that way you can counter as a pseudo blocker. And then we play 4 This Is My Age, so it looks as top 3, picks 1 Blackbeard card and puts the rest on the in the trash. So it's also a really good card for the deck because you have synergized with cards getting to grave, and also you search your deck and try to find your pieces. And it also has trigger as the same effect, so it's really nice to get from trigger 2. And then we play 3 Hachinosu. You can play 4, but I like 3 in my list. So it's like the Jerma stage. You can trash one card from your hand, look at top 3 cards of the deck, and put a Blackbeard card to your hand, and place the rest of the bottom of the deck. So this as a floor for the deck is really nice that you have 11 search cards, which makes the deck really consistent, and you don't have to rely on lucky draws. For example, if you're playing Roblucci, you have 4 more in your deck and you have no way to search it. So the only way to get to it is by drawing it. But in this deck, most of your cards are Blackbeard Pirates, and you play a lot of searches, which means that in most of the games you will see the whole of your deck, or like any card you want to see. And in that case, it's up to you for your like how good you play the deck and navigate what you want and what you need, which is what I'm looking for when I'm playing this game. And then as a black deck, of course, you have the removal, and as the basis, you play Laboon and Van Auger as the cost decreases. Because you can't play on play, you can't play like Rebecca Hina, you can't play other good cards that triggers on play. But what Laboon does, you can tap him to give something -4, and Van Auger taps himself to give something -3, and on KO draw a card. So these effects are really good together with some cards in this deck. Laboon is a little bit stronger because it costs less and decreases for more. But Van Auger is really good into some other scenarios when you want a body that's a 6k and also draws a card on KO. So it all depends on your curve. If you go first, Van Auger tends to be better, but if you go second, Laboon tends to be better. And if you don't need any of them, you can just either trash it with Hachinosu or with your leader ability. So it's really flexible if you don't need it or have them. And then for the removal, you play 4 Doku. This card is goated for removal. On KO, you draw a card, and you can tap him to KO something that costs 1 or less. So he synergizes really well with Labuna Van Auger to get rid of the lower cost things. And when he gets KO, you draw one, as I said. So he replaces himself, and as Lafitte becomes a pseudo blocker that also gives you a resource, which is really good. And also you can KO other 1 costs in the mirror for free. And it's a generally good card. And then for the removal events, we play 2 Liberation and 4 finger gun. You can bump list the 3. I will probably do it. I'm just trying this version of the list. But it's this card says that if your leader is Blackbeard, you can negate one card's effect for rest of this turn. For example, you can negate a blocker, you can negate 10 cost Shanks, just as an example. And if the card has 4 cost or less, you can KO it too. So you can KO Borsalino blocker, you can KO Jesusbergs, you can KO a lot with it, and also you can find lethal by negating blockers. So this card is really good. If there's a lot of Blackbeard in the format, you're probably going to bounce it to 3 or even 4. But right now in this list, I just have 2. And then we play Forth the Finger Gun. I don't think I have to explain this card. It's really good, and it synergizes well with Laboon and Van Auger, and it also mills card for your Bergs to pump it. So that's about the removal package of this deck. You often will find some of these cards together with another one. And into the matchups that they are good, you will most likely play them. If they are not good, then you can use them to cycle with Tachinosu, or you can use leader effect to trash them, or you can use them for counter, except the events then. But the events often comes up in most of the matchups. And then for the general units, so like the value drops, you play 4 Bergs. This is like, I would say, the best card of the deck. Initially, I didn't think it was that good, but when playtesting, this card is crazy. So he can't be KO'd by any effect. So that means Lucci, for example, can't KO unless he got the 9-cost Kaido. And a lot of other deck can't KO him. So that's why Liberation is such a good card, because it can KO Burgess. And for every 4 card in your trash, he gains 1000 power. And in a deck like this, where you go through a lot of your deck, you cycle cards with This Is My Age, you mill cards with Finger Gun, you cycle with Hachinosu, you draw cards with Van Auger and Dokyu, you fill your grave super fast. So you can get him to like 7 or 8k at turn 8, and it's crazy because he just scales and scales, and if you get multiple of him, it gets out of hand. So I would say this card is the best in the deck. But you can't, you have to use him in the right way. For example, against Luffy, he's decent, but he's not the best card because they can bounce it, and other decks can interact with him in some other ways. So you have to play with him the right way for him to be broken. And then you play the double Vasquez shot. Long time no see for the 2-2 blocker. I don't think I ever seen it. Maybe like in Whitebeard, a 2-2 blocker, but in this deck it's really good because you really want to stop the aggressive decks, and for 2 you can counter like anything. It's really good, and also it's a key card in the mirror when you start to chain the big guys. And then we play 10 of the Teach, the man himself. He's a 10-12 blocker. Now I have this one in Japanese because I used the I was about to say skin, but the alt art. So he's a 10-12 blocker, which is insane. And if your leader has the Blackbeard type, you can nullify your opponent's ability for the rest of this turn. For example, Enel, Nami, Bonnie, Shanks. I don't have any other example on top of my head, but they will probably come out more leader, which is good against. And you can also negate a character and freeze it for 1 turn, which is really good because you can freeze a threat, you can freeze lingering effects, you can freeze in the mirror, you can freeze a lot with him. And then with his stat line, it's really hard to get over him, and he's essentially a free block every turn. So when you start to get to late game and you are like even in resources, this card becomes super oppressive because you can just drop them, chain them together, and just win the game by the stats. So a key card for the deck. And then for the 2Ks, we play 4 Stronger, 4 Shiryu. You mainly play this because these are Blackbeard cards. I maybe played Shiryu once because my hand was bricky, just to trash 2 and draw 2. And I probably maybe played Stronger like once or twice just to put something to -2. But in a deck like this, I don't like to waste my resources on things like that. You often in a bad position if you have to play this. So yeah, they are just 2Ks. And then we play Bartolomeo. This one comes up more as it is as a blocker if you need it as a blocker, or it's a 2K if you need it as a 2K. So it's generally a good flexible card. And together with double Manchari, you can add up resources. For example, you can add Bartolomeo and loop it to protect and just play it. Or you can Manchari for Isbergs, you can Manchari for Van Auger, Laboon if you need it. And also by playing 2 Manchari, you can't deck out if you don't mill both or get both to grave, because Manchari can put that on the Mercenary on the bottom of the deck, and you can loop around like that. And it doesn't come up that much, but I played some mirrors where it counted like I won on deck out. So the card is really good, but generally it puts back resources into your hand that you want. So it's for the deck profile. I think the deck is really good. It's really fun to play, and it rewards skill for gameplay. That's all the things I look into a deck for playing One Piece. And now I'm going to go over some matchups. So let's talk about the matchups for this deck. I don't think any matchup in the game right now is a auto loss or a auto win. Maybe you got some auto wins, but most of the top tier decks is kind of skill based when you play against them. And that's also a thing I like, that you get rewarded when you play the deck at this peak. So essentially with the leader, you have to know every matchup, I would say to 100%, so you can navigate all the turns you want to do leader and you want not to do it. Because, for example, if you just do leader every turn, you run out of resources. And if you don't do leader, sometimes you need to, you can just be overwhelmed by the game. So you have to practice every matchup and find out and learn to read the game state to when you want to discard for black hole or when you want to keep the cards in your hand. For example, if you play into purple Luffy, you most likely want to black hole him on 7 dons and up, because then he can't play the Luffy that plays another card from the hand, and he can't overwhelm the board, so he can just play 1 card each turn, and you can answer it accordingly. And if you take a matchup like Dofi, maybe this argument to do it a little bit earlier, but like against Dofi, if he's at 5 don, he can only play 1 unit, one character. So in that case, you go -1 for him to negate 1 effect. That's not that impactful, but when he gets to 6 don and more, he can go for Boa and play another 4 cost. So at that point, it may be worth to discard. Another case into Dofi, we can talk about Dofi directly. For the Dofi matchup, you mainly want to see the Laboon, Van Auger, and the Doku. Together with Finger Gun is decent, and Liberation. These cards answer Dofi's board, and when he swings at these to get rid of them, you draw cards and you try to survive into the late game. Be careful with Dofi because he can aggro you down if he gets out of hand with the board, and if you go down to 0 life, he can kill you with the event. So I would generally want to see these cards against Dofi. Also, Lafitte is good and all the other searches, but Jesus Bergs is not that good in this matchup. It is if you can get him out, but you have to protect him every turn. So if you put him out on curve on 4 don, you have to do leader ability, because if you don't, the Dofi player can go for law, bounce him, and then I would say at that point you lose the game because you get out too much of tempo. So if you play him, don't play him on curve. If you have to play him on curve, make sure to use Teach so that he can't bounce it with the law. But in the late game, as you know, this card grows, and yeah, at that point it's really strong when you perma lock the opponent, and then he can just clear the bodies. So he gets better and better in late game, and he's not that good in the early game. That, for example, in the black matchups, you want to drop him as early as possible and fuel him up because he can't be KO'd. Generally against Luffy, as I said, you want to get the board and you want to get the late game to drop a Teach. In certain matchup, I try to get as many Teach as possible, but into Doffy, I just try to have 1 in my hand. So if you got 2 in your hand, I wouldn't say you have to be afraid to discard 1 with the Hachinosu if you need to see some other cards. But for example, in the mirror, you never want to discard a Teach because you really need it. So into Doffy, 1 or 2 is perfect in hand. If you have 3 or 4, don't be afraid to discard, because if you drop 2 Teaches on him, you most likely already won the game. So focus more on stopping the aggression and draw him out of resources. And into Purple Luffy, that matchup can be a little tricky because Purple Luffy also can swarm the board and out-resource you. So into Purple Luffy, I think his Bergs is a really good card because it's really hard for him to get rid of it. Also, Finger Gun is really good because Purple Luffy does have a lot of 5 costs in it, so it gets a really good value. Also, the 10 cost is really good in late game because you can like just win the game when you start to play him, and you're not that far behind of board. Vanager Laboon, kinda good. I don't think Vanager is that good. It works on the Zoro together with Dokyu, but I think Laboon is a lot better because you get reach on the 5 costs. So these cards are not the biggest prio, but they work to stop the aggression. So like in every matchup, your win con is to out resource your opponent. So you want to play accordingly to win as much resources as possible. And then if we take Black Yellow Luffy as an example, I have not played that matchup that much because there's not so many players on the sim. But the strategy I've been doing against it is I've been starving them, hasting to find Burgess because they can't out it, and try to fuel it up as soon as possible, stopping their aggression and then dropping 10 costs. Depending on the scenario, you can black hole the Moria turns, but if it's not a 0 life, I don't think it's that necessary to do. So I would just starve him and try to get aboard with Burgess and then try to survive and not get too far behind until you drop 10 costs. And you can also really easy go for game with multiple liberations on the Sabos, and then you can swing big with Burgess or with the Teach. But as I said, I have not played that matchup that much, so my opinion may change on it. But I think it's kind of fun and it's a fun matchup to play against. And then for the mirror, which I think will be more and more prevalent because I think people will get tired of playing the normal Lucci, black yellow, and this other old deck, and this is a new fresh face. So I think it's really good to put some eggs in the mirror basket. And as I told in the video before, Liberation, Birds, 10 cost are your key cards in this matchup. Also the searchers, so you can get to these cards as fast as possible. Mainly, you will compete for the board with the opponent. Vanager, Laboon, and Dokyu does not come up that much, but they do. But most likely, you will just play Vanager or Laboon as a like vanilla that can synergize with Dokyu to KO something. Dokyu is decent though because you can KO Lafitte, and he will most likely swing at it, so you draw a card, so you cycle one, and you can chain it together with this, but it does not come up that often, but it do. But focus on the Liberation, the Teach, and the Bergs together with the Surges, and try to win board. Also, Vasco shot is really good. Now I took him away from here, but he is really good into the mirror because you can just stick him to the board, and then when you start to chain Blackbeards against each other, because that's eventually what matchups ends up to, and you have a Vasco, you can go more aggressive with your 10 costs, and if he aggression on you, attacks on you, you can just block with Vasco, and then you can kill his 10 costs. So Vasco is also a really good card just to drop in the mirror. I would say the mirror is skillful and it's really fun to play. So if you want to get better at it, just spam the matchup and try to understand why you do it. So this was a brief summary of some of the matchups. I don't think I missed any. Okay, we could talk about Roblucci. Against Roblucci, just try to win the board, play it like the mirror, get to Burgess, and then you want to block him when he gets to the Moria on turn because Moria outvalues this deck card, but you can mitigate it by using his effect. I would say Boogie is kind of tricky because you want to do the leader to block him, but he can drop the 10 cost for free then. So I would say read the game state and use the build accordingly. I would say this deck can be able to threaten it without the leader effect, but be aware of that. I'm looking at list now with other decks. Shanks, I don't think Shanks is the best. It put on some results sometimes, but in general that matchup, don't get too low on life because he can aggro you down. Make sure to block Ben Beckman with leader so he can KO Burgess if Burgess is 6k or less. Yeah, answered aggression, and you can stun the 10 cost with Teach. And I have not played it so much, but I don't think it's that bad of a matchup. So this is a little bit general of my testing, what I feel about the deck. I may be wrong about some things, I may be right about some, but this is what I've been feeling when I've been playing the deck. I think it's really fun, and you should try it out. And don't be afraid to message me if you have any questions about it. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.